All right.
All
So
right,
hi
we're in
everybody. My
business.
name is Tim Whitley. I'm working with the HR Sci group. We're happy to be hosting Lydia today. Lydia Wu. She's amazing on LinkedIn. You should follow her. She's got a newsletter. She posts a lot of great content about HR tech, analytics, AI stuff. So I've been following her for a while. It's actually my first time to meet her in person, so I'm very excited. Um, but she's got a great presentation. We know this is a very timely topic, so I'll turn it over to Lydia to introduce herself.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tim. Appreciate it. Before I start my own introduction, hello from London, everyone. Normally, I'm based out of the West Coast, but here for a conference next week and waiting for my jet lag to tune itself out over the weekend. Super excited to meet you. Since we only have about 12 people, including myself, on the line today, first and foremost, I really, really don't like lecturing people for a whole hour. So please do me a favor and make sure it's not just me talking. Ask questions. I'm monitoring the chat in addition to the slides as well. And if there's any point that you have any questions, just put it in the chat. We can go from there. Tim, if I can get your help in terms of moderating the chat as well, that'd be super, super helpful. So we are all gathered here today to talk about generative AI, the thing that kind of all of a sudden sprung into our lives back in 2022 or so, it feels like, and has now permeated through the world of HR technology. I'm sure there's literally not a conversation you can have in HR technology today, regardless of the solution that we're talking about, without talking about generative AI. So what the heck is it? Is it fad? Is it future? What are we talking about? And who on earth is this person talking to you? So let's start with the first question. Who on earth is this person talking to you? Hi, Lydia Wu, 13 years in the HR industry, primarily on the HR tech side of the house. Started in consulting with Accenture and Deloitte, pivoted my way into industry with Panasonic, and is now pivoting again into the solution provider side of the house, still holding the information in confidence because I'm waiting for a press release to come out. Over the course of the 13 years, I have managed a lot of vendor portfolios, done the entire end-to-end suite of HR tech selection, so on and so forth, and at one point managed about a $40 million vendor solution portfolio for Panasonic. And I did a tally of how many solutions I have seen and how many I have implemented. So it's about 600 solutions that I've come across during this entire time. And on top of that, implemented about 60 odd now. So going from the big ones to Workday, SuccessFactors, Kronos, UKG, you name it, I've done it all the way to the itty bitty ones, including Syndio for pay equity, a very minor solution provider for employee engagement surveys, so on and so forth. So all said and done, I think I've seen and heard just about every sales pitch that's out there and met just about every variety of customer success managers who are out there. So let's pivot back to GenAI for a moment. And before we start talking about GenAI, what I wanted to share is what someone said to me about a couple weeks ago when I was chatting with them about like their perspective on GenAI and just everything else. And what they said to me was, you really have to remember before you even talk about AI and everything, what the original intent of computing was to begin with. When we started sending men to the moon, when we invented the first computer, when we started encoding, decoding information, the intention was always having thinking machines that answered questions for people in an expedited manner. And I wanted to sit on this definition for a moment because I think it's really, really critical for us to use this to lay the foundation of generative AI and technology disruptions. Because in here, you don't see the concept of technology replacing human. You don't see the conflict that we're seeing in the certain parts of the market today where it's human or technology or human versus technology. The whole notion of this, the whole notion of why computing was even created to begin with is to really augment the human ability to do things in a faster, better, more effective way. And to really take the human brain out of, and the human ability, if you will, out of the mundane into something greater, into something more creative, more innovative, into something that only the human brain is capable of, and not necessarily something that technology can take and essentially repeat over time. So I just wanted to share this because I think Ipsos Reid did a survey a couple months ago about the trust in the US as it comes to AI and technology and things along those lines. And over the course of 2022 through 2023, what we're noticing is that there is an increased level of skepticism as well as mistrust towards AI, towards technology. And even in the HR technology world, we're seeing a little more of that than we did back last year when the embracing of AI was all the rage at that point in time. So again, I think it's really important before we explain anything to really settle in on the foundation of what it was meant to do in the first place, and is it really delivering to that intention today? So how do you talk to a group of HR people about AI? I thought about this. And by the way, I don't have a degree or background in computer sciences. And that's why I kind of wanted to take you on the journey that I went down in terms of understanding AI and really understanding the intentions of AI, why it was created, and ultimately, where do we go from here? So what better way to start than a timeline? So here's the thing. AI is not new. And when I say it's not new, I literally mean that if you were to go back to ancient Greek, Chinese, Indian mythology, you would see signs of automated inanimate objects supporting mankind or helping mankind to do a certain activity. It ranges all the way from Talos who guarded the island of Crete in Greek mythology to the flying automatrons and automated machines in the Indian tale, the Ramayana. So even way, way, way back when, there has always been this notion in the human psyche, if you will, in that we will get machines to help us do our jobs one day. We will get machines to perform our tasks on our behalf. So fast forward into modern times then. 1940s is right around the decade when the foundations of what is known as artificial intelligence, it had really came into act, if you will. So this is when the notion of artificial neurons, the neural network, really became a part of mainstream scientific studies. It's the foundation, and hold to thought of artificial neurons and neural networks for a moment, because we'll come back to that. But really, the 1940s is when this kind of became an academic study topic, if you will. 1950s, I think, is a very well-known era. This is when Alan Turing came up with the Turing test. This is the 1956 Dartmouth Conference, where the words artificial intelligence was used in conjunction for the very first time, when you had a bunch of computer scientists and PhDs coming together to say, we got to give this thing a really sexy name. What are we going to call it? We're going to call it artificial intelligence. And the literature since the 1950s has really been using the words artificial intelligence to describe computers doing something to mimic human behavior, essentially. Fast forward into the 1960s, this is where we see the rise of the arguably first ever chatbot, the Eliza bot. And this is when natural language processing really came into mainstream in terms of computers being able to understand the unstructured phrases and sentences of a person and being able to structure a response in return. Now, the 1970s came right along, and the skepticism that we're experiencing in the market today, this really isn't the first time for AI, and that's why I think a lot of those who are deep and well into the AI industry are looking at the market skepticism and kind of saying like, let's just keep plugging along. Because 1970 was really what is historically known as the very first AI winter, if you will. This is when the funding kind of went down from a research perspective, as well as when the interest around AI in general just decreased. It was sort of like, yeah, that's a great novel concept, but we don't have real world application and real world problems for it to solve, if you will. So in the 1970s, if you kind of go back into the research and literature a little bit, you'll see that it's much more focused on computing as we know it today and much less focused on AI as we know it today. Fast forward into the 1980s, I think this is where the myth, and I'm going to call it the myth, of AI being a bunch of if and then statements came along. So in the 1980s, the system of dominance, if you will, in the AI world are known as expert systems. So this is where you basically go interview a whole bunch of experts and collate their knowledge together in a database. Most of the systems that were used and were super popular are in the pharma industry in terms of drug testing, adverse reactions, so on and so forth. And what it did was basically collate. I'm going to use HR as an example to say, if somebody were to come to you and say they quit, what would you do? What are the tasks? What is that knowledge tree of activities? if somebody were to ask you a benefit question, what would you do? What are the knowledge trees? What are the tasks? So on and so forth. And it took off in the beginning of the 80s because it was cool, right? It really saved costs in terms of not having to hire an expert, getting a system to do its job, so on and so forth. Well, here's a problem with a bunch of if-then statements, if you will, simplistically put, was that the maintenance, the updates, and being able to collate all the knowledge and keeping everything up to date was so over inundating that expert systems didn't really take off. So picture the SharePoint of HR policies in your own organization, for example. And now imagine you just kept on throwing policy on top of policy on top of policies in that SharePoint. Essentially, that's what these expert knowledge databases became. And it was just very unmanageable in terms of coordinating what responses to pull when and where, because it's really simple to code a system to run responses for, let's say, 5 questions. By question number 6, you'll realize that the logic starts to go a little bit wonky. And basically, that's what we found out in the 80s. And this is when, towards the end of that decade, we also experienced AI winter number 2, because again, technology exists. It's a beautiful product, but there's no real world problems to use that product to solve without, again, putting an overly large amount of human power into the maintenance of that technology itself. So let's fast forward into the 1990s, right? In the 90s, this is what I call sort of the modern day machine learning as we know it really came about. This is where machine learning started taking off as a branch of AI and started really folding itself into AI. And conceptually, if we think about AI as a very big umbrella, machine learning is a subsection of artificial intelligence. And I'll get into that concept a little bit more later. So in the 90s, machine learning neural networks took off. And that was also because there was a huge advancement in terms of computing abilities, computing power, and just the ease of access to technology at that point in time, if you will, from a technological revolution perspective. And this is really what set the foundations for AI as we know it today, so to speak. Fast forward into the 2000s, this is where AI was really gaining mainstream attention. I'm probably dating myself, but if those of you who were around for Tom Cruise's Minority Report, AI became mainstream to Hollywood, to a lot of mainstream media conversations and cultural conversations. And of course, in the late 90s, early 2000s, when IBM's Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov in a chess competition, that is also when AI all of a sudden became this thing that could do something better than a person can, which was never conceived of for technology before. 2011 is another milestone, IBM Watson on Jeopardy. I'm sure everyone knows that story and has heard of that story in the past. So I'm not going to go into it. But again, if you kind of think about the building blocks of AI and AI going mainstream, that was really another sort of quick hit of like, oh, Deep Blue, and now we have Watson. And fast forward into the mid 2010s is when you had a lot of self-driving vehicles where AI was really becoming a part of everyday work in the tech industry without being called AI, right? So if you think about the Siris, the Alexas, and all of the digital assistants of the world, that's roughly when they kind of really became popular and super mainstream as well. And of course, the 2020s, this is where AI really, really became what we know today, this thing that is just like looming in our personal and professional lives that we can't seem to get rid of. But the one thing that people don't really talk about in terms of why this time and how did it happen so fast is because of the pandemic. And Tim, I don't know if I'm allowed to mention that word or if you're putting this anywhere where that word is possibly banned. But really, because of what was happening from an economics perspective at that time, money was abundant and money was cheap because interest rate is so low. So when money is cheap, what do you as a computing researcher do? You get more computing power. You borrow money to do all the developments and buy all the equipment, all the knowledge that you haven't had before because you're able to do so. And this is really what brought us to November 30th of 2022. Just to make sure everyone's still with me, hands up if anyone knows the significance of that date. All right, we got Tim. Yes, Robert. ChatGPT. This is the day in a way, I call this the D-Day of the AI and HR chaos that we're experiencing right now. Because when ChatGPT went mainstream, every single person on the street now all of a sudden was aware of this thing called AI and now aware of this really cool chat tool that can essentially give you all the knowledge across the internet without you having to Google Wikipedia or do a lot of homework yourself, that can like do all these cool things that we were only able to see in movies before, but can really play with and touch as everyday consumers now. So with the rise of ChatGPT, then we now come to this sort of murky waters, as I call it, in the HR tech industry, where similar to a couple of years ago when everyone you talked to had an analytics function in their tool, even if it's just the dashboard, they'll call it, we have analytics. Now anybody you talk to is like, we have AI, but really sometimes I sit here and wonder like, okay, what the heck does that mean? Because did you just pop everything on top of any generative AI model? Did you develop your own model? Are you training your own data? What are you doing with my data as a feedback into that model, so on and so forth? So now that we're done sort of like my mini history lesson on AI, I think the other thing to really talk about is what are some of the key concepts around AI, right? Because I think one thing that I learned doing people analytics for the last little bit and HR technology for the last little bit is that things are only scary and dangerous when you don't truly grasp and understand what they actually mean. When you kind of wrap your head around the what's what of it, it becomes a lot less daunting in terms of understanding it, questioning it, and really productively thinking about it. So what I wanted to do next is really kind of go through a few of the key terms around the concept of AI, if you will, and kind of peel it back a little bit, because I've definitely had conversations with sales reps from different tech firms that will just throw words at you. They'll say we have AI, and it's like, okay, well, what's your model based of? Well, it's machine learning. Okay, you're not answering my question. What's your model based out of? It's natural language processing. We have deep learning. What the heck does all of that mean? Because no SHRM, no college course, no certification puts all of this in a way where I call my brain the HR brain, can understand it for the sake of our workforce, for the sake of our day-to-day jobs, and for the sake of compliance as an organization, if you will. So let's start from the top. Artificial intelligence. What the heck is that? Simply put, it's the intelligence of machines. That's it. And that's why I keep on saying that it's been around for a lot longer than we realize, because what we AI today is actually generative AI, which is a little bit different than the true intent of AI. AI, all it comes down to is the intelligence of machines and their ability to mimic human tasks and expedite them, essentially. So when people tell you we have AI, I would encourage you to dive a little bit deeper, because that's sort of I'm going to put it in sort of the HR tech world. It's when people tell you we have integrations. Any HR tech person on the line will know, and Tim, I know you're laughing, is when you get told we have integrations, there's a lot of questions. Is it an analyst manually manipulating a file and uploading it on a weekly basis? Are we SFTP dropping? Is there an API? What the heck do you mean by integrations? How secure is a connection? There's about 10 bajillion layers of questions. And I feel like Tim is about to scream at me through the cameras. But really, when people say we have AI, treat it as the word integration, because it's a cool word to say without a lot of substance behind it, if there is no further explanation behind it. Okay, so second word, what the heck is machine learning? Yes, yep, it is HR analysts manipulating Excel sheets. So machine learning is a subset of AI. So again, think of AI as a bigger cloud, machine learning is a smaller pillar of it. The reason why you hear machine learning so much is because machine learning inherently, from a pure academic perspective, tends to be more complicated than other forms of AI. So the reason why it's called out specifically is in the earlier days in Silicon Valley, when you have the engineers who do AI versus the ones who do machine learning, from an HR perspective, the machine learning ones will always command a higher average pay grade. And because of that, those who do machine learning want to call out the fact that what they're working on is machine learning, on top of the AI stuff. So it's just a subset of AI, if you will. And it's not a separate stream or a separate branch or anything else along those lines. And what machine learning does is that it just learns from the set of data it's given. And we're going to dive into the whole data conversation a little bit as well. But in machine learning, think of it this way. You feed one data set, the machine learns from that data set and comes up with an output based on the data set, based on your prompts or the parameters and the layers that it has in that model. Now, with machine learning, you're also going to hear another term, which is deep learning. So remember back way back when I said 1940s, this is when artificial neurons and neural networks came into play, and hold to that concept because it's going to come back later. Deep learning is what mimics the human brain from a layers perspective. So if you kind of think about it, deep layer tends to come with a lot more layers to the model, so, and a lot more parameters as well, just in terms of what it goes into. So when you look into a AI model that says like 7B or 70B, essentially what that means that it's either got 7 million parameters or 70 million parameters, which variables that go into the model from a processing perspective. Getting super technical here, but one key concept I would say is that machine learning, deep learning kind of go hand in hand. One is just a subset of the other. So again, let's not overcomplicate the language. I'm sure all of us who has worked in people analytics, who's done employee experience surveys, has heard of the words natural language processing, because this thing's been tossed around a lot longer before generative AI came into play. Natural language processing is really just a branch of AI, if you want to think about it that way, that really enables the human technology interaction through language and language models, allowing the machines to pick up the language, the sort of language that the human would input, and then returning in a more organic form of language in terms of a series of codes. Any questions so far? Is this interesting? Are we getting bored? I'm going to take silence as no questions so far. All right. Thank you, Melissa, for that. Appreciate it. So let's talk about the word generative, right? Generative AI. What the heck are you talking about? AI is AI. Is Gen AI just like a better word for it? No. So generative AI essentially is a subset, takes deep learning and propels it further. Let's look at the inherent meaning of the word generative, right? It's creation. So generative AI essentially indicates that the AI model you're using is able to create new outputs based on the historical data that it has learned. Okay, new outputs is the critical words here to say that if I feed you this common set of data, what predictions can you tell me that doesn't exist inherently in this set of data? What trends, if you do sort of trends and patterns, then that's sort of the original data model, not necessarily Gen AI, but if you're trying to pull more out of your data set that you would not originally have, then we're looking at the generative aspect of the AI model itself. So it's really being able to learn and adapt according to the data aspect of it. Oh, thanks, Yvonne. This is why I'm doing this. This is like a test to see if HR people are really going to be into this sort of history or not, because I think it's really, really important to grasp a notion of what are we talking about before we start talking about the actual thing itself. Okay, so artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, natural language processing, generative, creation of new outputs. Hopefully that makes everything a little bit less scary when you hear the words we use AI or we have AI or anything else along those lines.
Hey, Lydia, I do have a question if you're available at
it.
this point. You may get into it later, but I feel like the distinction between how generative AI like takes information and creates is like the difference between how that operates versus how like a traditional machine learning is very important, but I'm struggling to like explain it or wrap my brain around it or understand how it works in HR. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Kind of. So the example the reason why I say kind of is like it's a very blurry line academically to argue if something's definitively generative or if something's like machine learning type of AI. But let's go back to pay equity and distribution for a moment in the world of HR. So let's say you upload your entire organization's worth of pay data. Machine learning would tell you if it's equitable or not based on sort of what's already existing, job classes, wage ranges, geographic differentiations, anything else you can come up with. It would also tell you sort of what is the best way to band your organization because that data already exists. Is just taking something and saying like, look at it this way. I need you to look at it from a different angle on this whole with this whole problem. Generative AI, again, the way I think about it, would be able to say, actually, if your organization is in education, for example, these are the job titles that you currently have. Based on what I know of the industry, you may consider adding this new job class. And this is a wage I would recommend for the new job class. So again, it's taking data above and beyond what you have in the system and all of the different varieties from the environment, macro and micro, and layering it in to come up with a recommendation or to come up with a different thought, if you will. It's a beautiful concept if you think about it. But at the same time, the generative aspect is also what makes things a little scary because of the hallucinations and the ability to replicate. So deep learning, if you think about the layers of the model, has so many layers that the replicability and repeatability in some deep learning and generative AI models also become a challenge. And that's when you get the hallucinations, the wrong answers. And that's why like data is arguably now a huge part of the conversation as well. Does that help? Awesome.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you. I think it's that distinction of it's not just taking like the data it has, but
Yeah.
it's like everything out there for better or for worse. But
For
it's
better or
it's
worse, I think is the right way to look at it because, and here's sort of the additional tip I would give everyone on the call, right? So if you really, really dig into AI models today, or large language models, any type of models, you have your open source models and you have your closed source models. Open source models like Llama 2 from Meta are basically what developers can build their apps on top of. But the model itself and the data of which the model is trained on is open for everyone to manipulate, to look into, so on and so forth. Closed source, on the other end, is sort of like your OpenAI, your Anthropic, your Google Geminis of the world, if you will, where the coding of the model isn't available, but the ability to build your apps on top of that is available. There's pros, cons to both, but I think it's just, you do need to be aware of it because open source does provide a level of flexibility some organizations may look for, but it also lacks a little bit in security from an organizational aspect as well. And I think the other thing is really being able to just kind of ask the question of what model are you building your HR generative AI app on top of? Because very rarely, I would argue, have I come across an HR tech firm that has their own inherent large language model. It's typically built off of another model when it comes to generative AI. So just an understanding of it, I think, will also inform you just in terms of what do you need to watch out for, what are some of the gotchas, and what's important to you from a risk, privacy, security perspective as well. All right, so those are the 4 words. I'm going to do my next set of 4 words. So model architecture. Without getting super, super technical, this is where you're going to hear a lot of words like what I just mentioned, which is like layers, activation functions, parameters. Don't worry too much about it. If, again, dating myself, if anyone here has ever used a Access database from Microsoft way, way, way back when, I don't even know if they make Access anymore. It's it's very similar in concept to that model, right? Because all you're doing is the layers that it filters down. So think of it as like a sieve where top is like very large holes, and then you kind of just filter down more layers. And through each of these layers, you have parameters, which is essentially the variables that you're asking the model to look for. Oh man, Tim, I'm so sorry you still have to look at Access. I'm glad to know it's still a product that's available in the market though, because I haven't seen it in my suite for a very, very long time. And I'm sorry, Robert, for saying that word and bringing back nightmares. Well, hopefully that kind of helps you understand in terms of like the model architecture. Think of model architecture as like building a house, right? So large language models have their own architecture. Different AI models have their own architecture. And the only reason why these architectures exist is to tell the model what to do and how to filter and look at information that's been fed to it differently. Data. Okay, so this is actually my most favorite and least favorite part of AI. Here's a reason why. I think AI in HR is finally giving HR a chance to dig into its roots and dig into our foundations and look at how we built our tech stack to really make sure that we're collecting the right information at the right points in time and hope to heck that we can retire our access database at some point in the future. But the piece of data that I don't love so much is a lot of us are sitting on piles of hot trash from an HR data perspective. I hope I'm not making an overstatement here, but with HR data, a lot of times it's garbage in and garbage out. But with AI is that it learns from your historical data. So if your historical data has biases in it, if your historical data is a little bit wonky or a little bit off and you haven't really looked into it, you can't just leapfrog into AI. And that's why it makes me cringe when I hear a lot of HR organizations say, let's just do AI. You can't really do that because going from hot trash to automated hot trash hasn't really helped anyone historically. So with data, I think it's really critical for the entire HR function, to be honest, to become a little more data literate, to really understand the criticality of data architecture in their systems, because without that level of understanding and without that level of intentionality in designing a data architecture for an HR organization, it is incredibly difficult to get into AI that will work specifically for your organization. Can you use any generative model to come up with HR policies or to answer generalized questions? Sure, absolutely. Will it hallucinate? Probably. Are you ever going to be able to sit it on top of your own data set to answer your organization's specific questions? Probably not. So I think that's one concept I want to convey when it pertains to data. The second concept that pertains to data is structured and unstructured data. So everyone has structured data, right? This is the Excel spreadsheet that your HRIS system dumps out. This is like the back of the napkin stuff that your HR business partner keeps that they type into a Word document for you once in a while. But that's structured data. It already exists. It's categorized. Arguably not the best quality because sometimes you'll get an F instead of female, but things can get fixed along the way and scrubbing happens, part of our lives. Unstructured data is really where this whole thing of generative AI and machine learning get interesting, because I'm sure all of us have had to plow through at some point in our careers these open comments from surveys where you have to say like, this comment is related to communication. That comment is related to leadership. This comment is related to teamwork, so on and so forth. That unstructured data, there's so much richness to it that we hadn't been able to yield until machine learning and generative AI came along, because it tells us what are on top of the employees' minds without the HR lens of bias. Because, and this is the reason why I say this, I think a lot of us have sat through meetings where it's sort of like, well, employee says X, and you have all of HR in a room that says, X means da 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 in our world. So if the employee says there's not enough engagement in the team, we must deliver pizza party on the back end of it. Very simplistically put, but I think the whole notion of these pizza parties are HR biases coming into play of what organic human intention was. Perhaps there wasn't a team, or perhaps there's deeper rooted issues in all of that. But at the end of the day, you really, really need a different way of looking at it that removes a human lens out of it, and then kind of look at it from a more interpretive and broader perspective. Okay, we have a lot of questions coming in, so I'm going to take a quick pause here. From John, let's say you have an audience with a CHRO. CHRO is very interested in a general sense in AI, and they say AI, not general. Relying on substantive business for using AI, CHRO might be distracted by AI. How would I approach the conversation? I would approach the conversation and say, step one, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Don't talk to me about the technology. Don't talk to me about what you think the solution is. talk to me about the problem. Because the solution, honestly, can sometimes be as simple as whip out another Excel spreadsheet and ask the business partner to track it on the side. You don't need an AI solution unless the problem actually demands work. Step two, once you figure out what the problem is, look into how do we intend to solve it? What information inputs do we have from a solution perspective? And only then look into the potential technology solution if you need it, and then look into the ROI of that technology solution. This is why I said that from a AI perspective, everybody is doing AI. You can buy any solution that does AI, but buying a solution that does AI does not help you become any more productive than we did when we went from on-prem to on the cloud, because the cloud was supposed to be more productive. But for those who went to the cloud just for the sake of going to the cloud, they really didn't see that level of productivity, generally speaking. Classification is my biggest analytical. Yep, classification is a pain. This is, to be honest, classification, my hypothesis, and this is my personal opinion, is one of the biggest reasons why skills architecture and skills prediction and any of the skills tech hasn't really taken off, because we don't have a common understanding of certain words. And the English language is a very, very funky thing. It's my third language, by the way. So that's why sometimes when I compare, I'm like, English is a really weird language. Because when I say the word communication skills, to me, it could mean one thing. I'm sure to everyone else on this call, it could mean like 10 different things. And so when you have everyone in a room trying to come to a consensus of what the heck is a communication skill, that's when you run into issues. And I don't think you'll ever get a solution to that level of classification, which is, to be honest, why I kind of love the fact that AI kind of takes that necessity for generalized classification out of it and really just kind of pulls into a more definitive answer from a generalized problem. From Melissa, CHRO solving our shareholder here, we're using AI. AI what? Whitewashing, but find small ways to use it. Okay, so here's the thing. Using AI does not mean using generative AI. If the goal is to use AI, to be honest, any sort of process automation, any sort of click this button and the system will do this, that is AI. Because by the purest definition of AI, that is machines doing your work on your behalf intelligently. If the notion is doing generative AI, then I think the question becomes, do you have the foundations for generative AI? Because otherwise it becomes a lot of wasted investment dollars, to be honest. But there are in-between solutions that allows you to do verified and repeatable AI that essentially makes it a little bit easier from an implementation perspective and to kind of ease everyone into what the AI is capable of as well. Okay, so seventh concept, seventh concept, training. This is why data is so darn important, because, okay, think of a language model as a 2 or 3 year old, right? Put yourself in the shoes of a 2 or 3 year old for a moment. And imagine that you have no idea what the heck a bicycle is. And I'm trying to teach you or tell you what a bicycle is. And I have to say, like, it comes in 2 wheels that are aligned with each other. There is a seat on top of it, and there's a handlebar. And if the next time I show you a picture with a handlebar, a stroller, for example, you can be like, oh, is that a bicycle? And I would have to say, no, that's not a bicycle because it's got 4 wheels and there's a bassinet and everything else. So that's not it. This is what a bicycle looks like. So the next time you see something with a seat and 2 wheels, like a motorbike, for example, you would ask me, like, is that a bicycle? And I would have to tell you, no, that's not a bicycle, because a motorbike is powered by fuel and a bicycle has to be human powered, if you will, or kinetically powered. So in that sense, when you're training an AI model or AI data set, that is exactly what you're doing. You are teaching a 2 or 3 year old, or however old that language model is, what you wanted to learn and what it thinks something is. And because of this training and the nuance of the HR function and the language we use in the HR industry, this is also an area where a lot of the skepticism comes out of. And this is also an area where I would encourage everyone to ask questions of what the heck do you mean by generative AI in HR tech, and how did you train the model? Because if the model hasn't been trained in the HR context for the language for the people in your team, when you say the word Aetna, for example, it might not yield a response. It might tell you something that's about eye care, or it might tell you it's about dental care, or it might not even pull anything up at all, even though generally speaking, in theory, if a well-trained model will take the words Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, so on and so forth, and interpret it as health benefit provider. So training is super, super important. Training costs a lot of money. Training costs a lot of investment, which is also why, again, I always ask everyone to poke one step deeper in terms of what went into that training. The other part of, I think, in terms of where data and training really kind of comes in conjunction is the data privacy and security part of it. And this is why I always ask everyone, ask the question of what did they train the model on, but also what are they going to use your data for? Because in the world of generative AI, data security, well, data security hasn't been black and white for a very, very long time. But in the world of AI and AI models, data security has truly become this variety of gray where black and white doesn't exist anymore. So there are varying levels of how your data can be used in terms of, is it openly accessible to everyone? Is it critical information only? Is your data going to be used for training of the model? What part of your data is going to be used for training of the model? Is the model that your data trained going to be available to other users in the ecosystem through your vendor? And what does that mean from your employee personal and privacy data perspective, so on and so forth? So take all of that in mind, that when you ask the training question, there's always a pro and con in terms of that level of training versus what your data is being used for in training that model. From Robert, do I think open source local models have an advantage with respect to privacy? No, I don't. So here's the thing. The models inherently are trained organically. And on top of that, when you develop an app, you're actually given an opportunity to train, fine-tune the model further. A lot of times the core model themselves don't always pull in any sort of private or personal or organizational based data, but how your vendor and how your technology solution provider has built their solution stack on top of that, and how they're leveraging that language model or that open source model that's sitting at the bottom. This is the part that the data privacy conversation comes into play, not necessarily in the open source model themselves. Hopefully that answers your question. It sounds good, but it doesn't really help too much when you dig into the nitty gritty bits of it. Oh, of course, I forgot to advance the slide, but security, I think we started talking a little bit about it. So I think keep an eye out for security. It's definitely going to become a huge gray area. I'm sure all of us here has heard about the EU regulation for AI security, all of the collaborations and coalitions and agreements that are being bilaterally signed across different countries like the US and the EU, for example. All of that is new, but it's not net new. So if you think about how GDPR was done and how GDPR triggered most of our organizations to treat risk assessments a little more closely, this AI regulation presented by the EU, which is probably going to set foundation for a lot of other regulations to be tabled globally as well, is really looking at life from a risk factor perspective. And when how they look at risk really comes down to, what is the intentionality of this AI solution? What is the worst someone can do with this AI solution? And what is the adverse impact that the outcome of this AI solution is going to yield? So when a lot of HR organizations come to me and ask a question like, I want to use AI, but I don't know about this whole security thing. I'm just going to make it an IT thing. Like as HR, I don't want to worry about security. I don't want to worry about compliance. I'm just going to punt it all over to IT. Probably not the best idea, but here's how I would make security a little less scary for you, if you will. Think of it as, if you've done any risk assessments in an organization, you would know this, but think of it as, what is the worst thing someone can do with this solution? And are you leaving the decision to the machine or the human? Because the way I look at it is AI solutions can take you 90% of the way in terms of making sure the data is being fed, making sure that expediting the work and doing everything more efficiently. But at the end of the day, there has to be a human component to all of this. So think of recruiting solutions, for example, which is all the rage in the market with AI solutions. is the solution making a decision on your behalf, or is this just feeding the information to a human recruiter for that recruiter to make a decision based on their experience, based on their knowledge, so on and so forth? Because at the end of the day, all the regulations are looking for is a human verified technology enabled solution in AI, as opposed to allowing technology run rampant, making decisions on its own. Any questions, comments so far? And just taking a look at the chat here. All right. So I always like to leave my presentation with a little bit of a takeaway in terms of what can you do differently tomorrow? What can you ask differently tomorrow? Here's my 5 questions I recommend for anyone to ask if you're looking for an AI solution in the market, or if your vendor tells you that, ooh, we do AI, look at us first. So here it goes. Oh, before I do that, question from John. What about security from a protection of PII standpoint? How do you prevent personal data from leaking out? Great question. Don't share personal data unless you have to. So a lot of times you'll hear survey providers saying like, hey, I need your people's email, and then I need all of their demographic information. I always veer towards the direction of share as little over the firewall as you possibly can. Sometimes it even helps to design in a little pseudo ID in your HRIS core system. So all you have to do share from a survey perspective is a pseudo ID plus their email address, and that's it. And that pseudo ID is what gets fed back into your system from a demographics mapping perspective. Share as little as you can so you're minimizing the risk of anything leaking out or anything being used for whatever reason to train other models in the ecosystem. Hopefully that answers your question, John. Going back to the 5 questions to ask for any HR tech solution that has we do AI. First question I would ask is, what models is your solution using? Is it sitting on top of OpenAI? Is it sitting on top of Anthropic? What does life look like? What is being used to enable the AI solution? Because again, from a funding computing power perspective, very rarely will you come across an HR tech organization who has inherently and fully in-house built their model. Second question, how is it trained? Did you train using your customer data set, general market data set, even general market data set? Did you use Australian, European, American-based organizations? Because every organization is different. Every region behaves a little bit differently. What is diversity of the data set that you're using to train your solution? Third question, how is your customer data set used in training? AKA, what the heck are you going to do with my data once it's over the firewall into your ecosystem? Number 4, are the outcomes from your solution explainable? So this is a question that I love to use to combat AI hallucinations, or just the random slapping on of generative AI. Because if the vendor has done, or the solution provider has done a good job in developing their AI, developing their model, and really scrutinizing it, you will be able to see how the calculations are made. You will be able to see what data sets are used, what parameters are used. You will be able to cancel out certain parameters, for example, demographics like age, gender, that's not important for the generative prediction that it's coming out, and you'll be able to manipulate those specific parameters in that calculation. So this is why the outcome being explainable is super, super important, because one thing that all of the AI regulations are going after is also the auditability, the ability to audit where the solution came from and being able to legitimately see the sort of logic pattern, if you will, in the generation of that final AI solution. Number 5, how do you ensure the outcomes are verified and repeatable? AKA, do you make sure that a human looks at the answer before the machine spits it out, or if there's a feedback loop that is available for the human to intervene if the machine is going to give an incorrect answer? And that is super, super important in HR, because one thing I always advocate for HR tech is you can't take the human out of HR tech. There's no way for us to automate everything in HR because of the way it's so nuanced and so context rich, if you will. So even when you're looking at a generative AI solution across the board, you need to make sure that the answer that's coming in is verified, can be repeated. So when Tim asks a question about vacation policy, he's not going to get 20 days. And when I ask the same question, I'm going to get 15 days, because I think that's going to be a lot of people in your inboxes and at your door trying to figure out what the heck is going on there. So hopefully that helps. we've been doing a lot of Q&A. I'm just keeping an eye on the time as well. I'm going to leave with one last thought before we open the floor up again, which is a question I tried to answer. Generative AI for HR, bad or future? So here's the thing. A quick 30-second synopsis. If you're doing AI for the sake of doing AI, don't do it. It is an absolute fact. You're throwing your money away, spending on a new HRIS analyst. There is way more bang for your buck that you can get out of it. However, if you can figure out the problem that you're solving, and if genuinely the AI solution is what your organization needs, and if there's a genuine ROI to that solution, then I would say generative AI is the future of HR in terms of the ability to expedite, deliver efficiency, and allowing machines to do a lot of the boring and mundane work on our behalf so we can really redirect our attention and direction somewhere else. Hopefully that was a helpful 50-minute conversation. I think we got a couple minutes for any other Q&A or just general discussion. Tim, I don't know how you want to wrap this up. And for those on the line, any other questions? Happy to chat. Doesn't even have to be Gen AI.
I have a question. This has been awesome, by the way. Really, really cool. As you talk to like HR organizations, are you seeing them as they think about whether it's just a shiny kind of new toy and being able to say that they do it, or they have real kind of value add problems they can realistically solve with AI? Are you seeing them mostly look at vendor solutions? So, that ranges from like, things that go through OpenAI or Anthropic or a proprietary model provider, or, existing parts of their software stack. So like LinkedIn has AI options, now built into the system. Are you seeing them really only consider kind of out of the box, vendor solutions, or have any people in HR organizations said, hey, maybe we can build this on our own? So you mentioned Llama earlier. Hey, we're going to bring Llama down. We're going to buy, a computer with a big GPU. We're going to host it and code around it. Have people even gotten to that point of the discussion yet?
So it's actually really interesting that you asked that question. I think I'm going to take a step back before answering it, because I think the answer really depends on who owns HRIS in the organization. When HR owns HRIS, and again, this is a generalization, so Pareto principles take this as the 80% of the population. When HR owns HRIS and when they are asked to do more AI and look for potential cost efficiencies, because hello, high interest rates and every CFO trying to scrape every dollar out of everyone's budget possible right now, they are looking at out-of-box solutions because it's typically easy. Most vendors are only testing the waters with AI solutions for HR right now, so they're willing to give the solution at a pretty big discount. And if you have a relationship with the solution provider already, it's usually easier to just flip a switch and say, we have AI enabled, without really getting deep into what the heck does that mean, right? So if you look at the sort of jewel that sits on top of SAP SuccessFactors, Workday's Assistant, so on and so forth, I am seeing a lot of HR teams opting into that just to try it out, not necessarily using the product or anything else of full capabilities, for two reasons. Number one, to get the C-suite off their backs from a are you doing AI perspective. And number two, from a it's easier, I don't have to hire the skill sets and I don't have to do anything much more different than what I'm doing today perspective. If IT owns HRIS, I am seeing a lot more to what you're saying, which is, hey, let's bring in some more computing power, some more muscles, and let's try to build it ourselves. But this is where I think sort of the conflict of IT and HR kind of comes into play, and how we have historically organized our corporate functions, and how that may not be suited for the future of AI solutions, because IT looks at a solution solely from a, is this technically feasible perspective? A lot of times what we don't do is look at it from, can I build it? Can I support it? Who from HR is going to test it? Who from HR is going to maintain it? Where the heck am I going to get the data set from above and beyond my own organization? How do I make sure that legal and compliance and risk are comfortable with the outcomes of it? And where does all of that downstream impact go? Because the reason why I tell a lot of organizations who want to build their own AI solution to build it first is because only in building it do you understand the pain and the requirements that you truly need from a product. And only in doing that do you truly understand if build is a sustainable long-term solution or if you should just really go and buy it. Did I answer your question?
Hey, since we are close to time, I just wanted to say for the people that may have to drop, so thank you for your time. I think if Lydia, I don't know if you want to stay on and answer some questions in case other people have some, but thank you for your time. I think we're gonna have some more. We're not sure. We've been trying to plan these type of presentations every Friday at 12 Eastern, 11 Central. So be on the lookout. I think there's one planned for next week. I was trying to find the details, but I couldn't. But yeah, we'll send that out. But yeah, feel free to connect with Lydia or me. But yeah, if you want to stay on and Lydia's okay to stay on and take some more questions. So thank you,
Yep,
everybody.
I've got a couple more minutes if anyone wants to hang out.
Uh, uh, Lydia, of course, you know I'm a big fan of your column, but I guess I'm interested in some of the natural language processing aspect because even before ChatGPT, I was doing so at Wells Fargo, I was a subject matter expert on text analytics and text mining. And so I did natural language processing. But back then, I was hesitant to say any of it was AI, even though some people would like attribute what I would classify what I was doing as AI. And I used like algorithms based on matrix algebra, and I used what's called a bag of words model, where you don't pay attention. You build a topic model, but you don't pay attention to the order of the words in the sentence. So the AI, so there's no real AI in there, in that you're just using algorithms, and the algorithms don't necessarily know what the words themselves mean. It's just mathematically finding patterns in those words. Uh, and you need a human to interpret the output. But it looks like the world has changed for text mining, because I don't feel like I can like lead with that as a skill on the job market anymore, what with ChatGPT. And I've seen ChatGPT do very, very good results on, like, for example, quantifying the sentiment of an employee comment, and it can like sort of like read an employee comment and say whether it's positive, negative, or neutral on a scale of 1 to 5, and like nail it in a way that algorithmic so I guess is what makes ChatGPT special, like it's not algorithmic, and if it's not algorithmic, what exactly is it?
What makes ChatGPT special was their go-to-market person and their marketing department, and the fact that they have Microsoft funding in the back. I'm just to be very blunt and honest here.
Oh, seriously? It's algorithms all the way down?
I don't know what goes into the ChatGPT model, to be fair, but I do
Okay,
think
gotcha.
the applicability and usability of a lot of OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google's models has a very large part to do with their marketing department, the consumerization of these models on the sort of greater market, if you will. I do think from an algorithm perspective, and again, this is where I go into it depends on which vendor you speak with, and it also incredibly depends on the model that they're using. There are certain cases that I've seen when you kind of peel a little deeper into it, it is algorithm based. There are other cases where it's a little more complex if they sit it on top of another large language model, so on and so forth. So again, I think it's about what cost companies can afford to buy the solution. It's about what's important to them, because again, if you're feeding your data into a broader model like ChatGPT, there is a risk that, and very high likelihood, that your data is going to be used to train a greater model, which then again brings a question. And I think a lot of the reason why a lot of organizations are banning their HR people from using ChatGPT, which is, where's my data going, and am I on the brink of a possible data privacy or security incident if a lot of my data has now been shared into the consumer platforms.
Yeah, and I guess a follow-up question would be, so are you saying that it's more the marketing department and the consumerization and the UX UI that is giving the appearance of consciousness and sentience and wisdom from these tools.
Not calling any vendors out particularly, but I will say there are certain tools on the market where the appearance is greater than the substance of the actual tool itself.
Gotcha. But in a way, it's all algorithms and models. But with something like generative AI, it's way more sophisticated models, way more.
It's the layers, right? So every single layer,
orders of magnitude more data points, and way more computing power. Is that a good way of putting
pretty
it?
much, yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
That makes it a lot more easier to understand.
Hopefully that helps. All right, Tim, I do have to drop for another call. But for anyone listening to this on recording, happy to answer more questions on LinkedIn. You can always reach me there, and hopefully you all found this one useful.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll have the recording, probably put it on YouTube and put the link out there somewhere. So thank you. Appreciate
Awesome.
it,
Pleasure
Lydia.
meeting
Lydia,
everyone.
appreciate your time. Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Bye-bye.